Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. In 2009, Nobel laureate Al Gore predicted that the Arctic might be ice-free by the summer of 2014. His prediction didn't do very well. There's been no trend in Arctic sea ice over the last 16 years. Greta is convinced that the Arctic is melting, but since she was a toddler, there's been no trend in Arctic sea ice. Arctic sea ice extent is highest for the data in the past 9 years. It's also higher than 2007, 2006, 2005, 2004, and 1989. The amount of melt from April 1st to April 26th is lowest since 2009 and 7th lowest on record. The extent of Arctic sea ice is higher now on April 25th, 2022 than it was on April 25th, 1989. Let's take a look at what people were saying about the climate in 1989. Tom Karl was the head climate scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for many years. In 1989, he said, "Analysis of warming since 1881 shows most of the increase in global temperature happened before 1919, before the more recent sharp rise in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. While global climate warmed overall since 1881, it actually cooled from 1921 to 1979, Karl said." So according to NOAA in 1989, Earth warmed from 1881 to 1919 and then cooled from 1921 to 1979. But this story didn't suit NOAA's current global warming agenda, so they altered the data. Now NOAA shows cooling from 1881 to 1919, and they show warming from 1921 to 1979. By tampering with the data, NOAA reversed both of the trends they reported in 1989. When the data doesn't match their theory, government scientists simply change the data. Let's take a look at the front page of the New York Times from January 26, 1989. U.S. data since 1895 failed to show warming trend. A study from NOAA published in Geophysical Research Letters said there was no warming in the United States from 1895 to 1987. But once again, NOAA has changed their data. Now they show a lot of warming from 1895 to 1987. NOAA achieved this fake warming by massively cooling older temperatures. In order to create the appearance of warming, they cooled temperatures from the late 19th century by 1.2 degrees. This sort of fraud is known as policy-based evidence-making. These scientists are abusing their position of trust in government, and they are defrauding the public. Also in 1989, the United Nations warned that we had to stop global warming by the year 2000. Their deadline for planet Earth was 3 years before Greta Thunberg was born. They said that if we didn't stop global warming by the year 2000, sea level would rise 3 feet and the Maldives would drown. But the Maldives are still there, and they seem to be doing just fine. And in fact, the Maldives have grown as much as 8% over the past 6 decades. But things weren't always this good in the Maldives. In 1837, some of the islands actually were disappearing under the water. 1989 was a big year for climate scamsters. On January 26, 1989, the Secretary General of the British Commonwealth said, "Governments must yield national sovereignty to multilateral authorities able to enforce laws across environmentally invisible frontiers, if the greenhouse effect which threatens the future of whole nations is to be overcome." This was never about science or climate. It was always about scaring people into accepting global governance. Let's take a look now at the current global warming fear-mongering. Northern Ireland has to get rid of 1 million sheep and cattle in order to reach their net zero carbon emissions goal. Northern Ireland is a cool, wet place which has no reason to be worried about global warming. And there's a reason why they depend on the meat industry rather than farming. 1 million people died from famine in Ireland around the year 1845. They were heavily dependent on growing crops, but the climate was so wet and damp that the potato crop failed year after year. The potato famine was devastating to Ireland, so they started raising livestock instead. And now climate alarmists are trying to get Ireland to get rid of their reliable supply of food. Let's take a closer look at what the climate scam is all about. They say we're headed for near-term extinction, but it's also an exciting financial opportunity. Besides the global governance scam, this is also a money-making scam for many people. In fact, the world's leading climate fraudster Michael Mann is trying to extort more than $500 billion out of large corporations. This is quite a protection racket he's got going. Nice little climate you've got there. We wouldn't want anything bad to happen to it. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this scam for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Curie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.